Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we are going to still be in Acts. We're going to be in Acts for the next couple weeks. But here we're going to see Paul. He's going to appear before Festus. And if you've been following along with this, it's just been a trial. Um, and Paul being moved from and being in front of one group of people or one person to one person, and basically he's having to appeal his all the way up to Rome, which we'll see here today. But again, we're going to do this chronologically. So we're in Acts 25 verses 1 through 22 today. It says 3 days after Festus arrived in Caesarea to take over his new responsibilities, he left for Jerusalem, where the leading priests and other Jewish leaders met with him and made their accusations against Paul. They asked Festus as a favor to transfer Paul to Jerusalem, planning to ambush and kill him on the way. But Festus replied that Paul was at Caesarea and he himself would be returning there soon. So he said, "Those of you in authority can return with me. If Paul has done anything wrong, you can make your accusations." About 8 or 10 days later, Festus returned to Caesarea, and on the following day he took his seat in court and ordered that Paul be brought in. When Paul arrived, the Jewish leaders from Jerusalem gathered around and made many serious accusations they couldn't prove. Paul denied the charges. "I am not guilty of any crime against the Jewish laws or the temple or the Roman government," he said. Then Festus, wanting to please the Jews, asked him, "Are you willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there?" But Paul replied, "No, this is the official Roman court, so I ought to be tried right here. You know very well I'm not guilty of harming the Jews. If I have done something worthy of death, I don't refuse to die, but I am innocent. No one has a right to turn me over to these men to kill me. I appeal to Caesar," which was his right. Festus conferred with his advisors, and they then replied, "Very well, you have appealed to Caesar, and to Caesar you will go." A few days later, King Agrippa arrived with his sister Bernice to pay their respects to Festus. During their stay of several days, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. "There is a prisoner here," he told him, "whose case was left for me by Felix. When I was in Jerusalem, the leading priests and Jewish elders pressed charges against him and asked me to condemn him. I pointed out to them that the Roman law does not convict people without a trial. They must be given an opportunity to confront their accusers and defend themselves. When his accusers came here for the trial, I didn't delay. I called the case the very next day and ordered Paul brought in. But the accusations made against him weren't any of the crimes I expected. Instead, it was something about their religion and a dead man named Jesus, who Paul insists is alive. I was at a loss to know how to investigate these things, so I asked him whether he would be willing to stand trial on these charges in Jerusalem. But Paul appealed to have his case decided by their emperor, so I ordered that he be held in custody until I can arrange for him to be sent to Caesar. "I'd like to hear of this man myself," Agrippa said, and Festus replied, "You will tomorrow." And so Felix's successor, who left Paul in prison for 2 years, was Festus. He was appointed by Nero, and basically to be the governor of Judea. And this was about the time frame of AD 59 to AD 62. Josephus wrote about Festus, and he wrote about him as a conscientious, honest administrator who was not able to stem the rising tide of Jewish unrest despite his strong action against the party there. And so, Josephus wrote about him. He resisted the Jewish leaders' attempt to have Paul's trial moved to Jerusalem, but he was not immune to their pressure. And in this climate, this day and age, I understand that, why it would be. And so they bring up the serious accusations, right, that Luke writes about here in Acts. And they were probably the same ones that they had raised previously. But again, they were not, there was no supported evidence. It was just hearsay. And so Festus, wanting to please the Jews, right? The governor, he would later state his official reasoning for delaying Paul's trial and agreeing to and asking to move it to Jerusalem, right? His request to do this, he was trying to please the Jews. He was trying to make the Jews happy. Paul knew what they were going to do, right? If they moved him back to Jerusalem, they'd either try to kill him on the way or kill him while he was there. And so, he was not going to play around with this. Paul knew the law. Paul knew what he could do. And so Festus' suggestion that Paul be tried in Jerusalem was what motivated the apostle to appeal to Caesar, because he knew what would happen, right? He knew if he went back to Jerusalem, he was going to die either on the way there or while he was in Jerusalem. He knew they planned on murdering him. And so, right, and like Paul said, "I'm not afraid of death." Paul said, "I'm not afraid of death," but he objected to being turned over to a biased court intent on murdering him. He knew what their role was. And it wasn't about justice. He's like, "Look, I'm not afraid to die if I'm, dying for the right reason, dying for a good cause. But I'm an innocent man. I'm not just going to let you kill me." And so, So Festus granted Paul's appeal, which he had to, right? He was a Roman citizen; he had a right to appeal to Caesar, and so this fulfilled Paul's conviction that he must see Rome. He was going. This now meant that Paul was going to go to Rome, and so we then see that King Agrippa arrives with his sister Bernice. It's literally Agrippa the king and Bernice arrived. So Festus discussed Paul's case with Agrippa, and he basically he had come to Caesarea to basically make his courtesy call the new governor. It was it's all politics, it's all that kind of stuff. And the one thing that he talks about here is it was the fundamental principle: Roman law did not convict people without trial, right? And we see that the Jewish people did. A lot of times it was fake trials or false trials and stuff like that. He said they must be given an opportunity to confront their accusers and defend themselves. They absolutely have to be able to do that. That's Roman law. And so by doing this and by Luke writing about this actually put the Roman judicial procedures in a favorable light for the readers of Acts. This is one of the things Luke when Luke wrote of Acts, and Luke wrote a lot of things, and some of the other writers, a lot of the times the things that were written about Rome and the Romans were actually favorable. Or it didn't put them in a bad light, which would not have been popular with a lot of the writings because Roman had conquered much of the known world at that time, and so a lot of these people that these books were written to were under Roman control. And so, but they still did this, again, because they weren't the movement of Christianity wasn't about trying to overthrow Rome or do anything against Rome. It was about spreading the word of Christ, and that's what their intent was. So if they could, not, they didn't want to go against Rome in their writing. So there was no criminal accusations against Paul. They even said it's like this is religious stuff, right? But the objections were about their religion and centered on Paul's claim to be alive. And so what we're going to see tomorrow is that Paul is going to speak to Agrippa, and we'll look at that and look at those verses. And it's a good conversation. I think it's one that it's a longer conversation. It's a longer read. But again, I think it's an example for us to follow when we talk to people who are not Christians and we're trying to talk to people about the Christian faith. So as always, I hope you're learning from these. I hope that you're learning from them. I do. I always find new details and new things as we go through these. And as always, I encourage people to subscribe to the channel. That way you can follow along with us if you'd like to through this Bible study as we go through. We try to send these out every morning when we can. And again, as always, I appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch.